I'm Identical Triplets, and here's a story of how we went from thinking we were having one baby to three. My husband and I got married in July of 2021, and in November of 2021, we found out that I was pregnant. We always knew that we wanted to have 2 kids. We felt like that was the perfect number, and that was our plan. As I found out I was pregnant in November, it was right around the holidays, and so I called my OB's office, and they were like, hey, we can either get you in now, which will probably be too early to really see much, but we can confirm your pregnancy, or we can wait until after the holidays. I'm an incredibly impatient, impulsive person, so I opted to see the doctor before the holidays. So we go and they confirm my pregnancy via just a urine sample, and then they start doing the ultrasound. And the doctor's in there and she's looking around and she stops and looks at myself and my husband and she goes, do twins run in your family? And we immediately just start cracking up. My husband's father is a fraternal twin, so we had always joked that someone in the family might have twins, and like, how funny would it be if it was us, because we just wanted 2 kids and that felt perfect. So she tells us that one of the babies that she sees has a strong fetal pull. So she says, you are definitely pregnant. One only has a strong fetal pull, the other one does not. So, second baby might vanish, but like, you're definitely pregnant. We need you to come back in a few weeks to confirm if it's twins or if it's just one baby. So we left that appointment feeling pretty positive, and our heads were kind of spinning. We were like, oh my gosh, we might be having twins. Like, this is crazy, but also really excited because like I was pregnant and we were just happy to be pregnant. Now that appointment, I was 5 weeks and 5 days, which is why it was really hard for them to see exactly what was going on. Fast forward to 8 weeks and 3 days, I think, something like that. We go in and the doctor's doing the scan and she gets quiet. And it's not good when a doctor gets quiet. And she kind of stops and she's like, okay, you're definitely pregnant with twins. Like, that is a fact at this point. Like, we can tell that is confirmed. She says, but we think you're having a really, really high risk case of twins, something called mono twins, monochorionic, monoamniotic, which means it's 2 babies sharing 1 placenta and 1 amniotic sac, which means that the babies are essentially just living in the same amniotic sac, which is super high risk because they can tangle each other, and I would have had to be hospitalized at 24 weeks for consistent monitoring throughout the rest of my pregnancy. So we left that appointment absolutely gutted because we were just petrified. It sounded really scary. It was not the news that we were hoping to get, and we were just really on eggshells for that entire weekend until she got us in with a specialist. So then we go to the specialist appointment, and the tech is in there and she's doing the ultrasound and she's looking around, and I am staring at the screen. It's up on the ceiling, on the wall, and my husband is sitting behind me. So as she's scanning around inside, like my uterus, I'm looking and I'm like, I see 3 babies, but I'm not a professional. I'm an elementary school teacher at the time, so I don't really know what I'm looking at, but in my head I'm like, I definitely see 3 babies. Like, this isn't 2, this isn't what I saw last week. Like, there are 3 babies in there, but I don't say anything because I'm not the doctor. And then different tech, gets quiet and she's like, she goes, I see 3 babies. And I shoot up on the table and I'm like, are you me right now? Like, are you kidding? And she's like, yep. She's like, there are 3 babies. She goes, I'm gonna go get the doctor. And I look at her and I was like, yeah, please. I was like, I need answers stat. And that 5 minutes between when she gave us the news that we were having triplets to when the doctor came in the room were like some of the scariest moments of our life, because you just see your whole future flashing before your eyes. Like, we had envisioned this one singleton pregnancy, this healthy pregnancy, low risk, that's what you hope for, right? And that is what we had envisioned in our heads. And then we kind of started to wrap our heads around having twins. We're like, okay, twins, we can do twins we could do 2 parents, 2 hands, 2 eyes, we can handle this. But when you hear that you're having 3, you are immediately outnumbered. It is terrifying. You don't hear about a lot of people having triplets in real day-to-day life. There's a lot of twins out there, but not a lot of triplets. And so we were just petrified. So the doctor comes into the room and he looks at myself and my husband and he's like, I have good news for you. And he's like, I have not so great news for you. How do you want me to deliver it? And we were just like, just tell us everything. And so this doctor proceeds to tell us, he is a high-risk pregnancy specialist. He's something called a maternal fetal medicine specialist, and he specializes in twins. And so he tells us, he's like, good news is, from what I can tell, it's still early, your babies all have their own amniotic sacs. He's like, that's good news because that puts you at less of a risk for, you know, like cord entanglement and things like that. So we're like, okay, good, that's good news. And then he goes, you know, the not so great news is that your babies are sharing one placenta, which puts you in a super high risk category for something called twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome, which is where the babies are not equally sharing the placenta. They're not equally sharing blood flow, things like that, oxygen, like the things essential to sustain life in the womb. And then he starts to go into what I've come to find out all like high-risk specialists do have to talk to you about, something called fetal reduction. And he's like, I just have to give you your options. He's like, you know, you can keep the pregnancy and keep all 3 babies and see where this goes. You can opt to reduce to twins, so you could have 2 babies. You can opt to reduce to 1 baby, or we can just terminate the pregnancy altogether. And finding out that we're having triplets and then also having that conversation in the same breath was just a lot to absorb. And our big question to the doctor was, are the babies healthy? Like right now in this very moment, are these 3 babies healthy? Like, are they okay? Are they growing on track? Like, do you see any major abnormalities? Like, are things good right now? And he was like, yep. He's like, they look great. He's like, they're growing on track. They seem to be healthy. Like their size is good for, you know, how far along you are, everything. And so my husband and I were just like, okay, then we continue on with triplets and we just hope and pray for the best. So we end that part of the conversation with the doctor, and then he says to us, he's like, you know, I'm just a twin specialist. He's like, I don't do triplets, so we need to send you to another specialist that covers what you're dealing with. So now we've gone from one doctor to another doctor, and now we are on to our 3rd. So they quickly get me set up with a new doctor, and we go to this appointment, and I was about, I don't know, maybe like 10 weeks pregnant at the time. We found out that we were pregnant with triplets at 9 weeks and like 3 days, I think. But they sent us this new doctor and we get to his office and he's sweet as can be. I really liked him. He basically just greets us and he gives us like a spiel and he looks at me, he goes, he says 2 things. He goes, first, I really don't think that you are having what is called monochorionic triamniotic triplets. So he thought that the twin specialist was wrong. He's like, I have never seen this in my career. I've been practicing for X amount of years and I've never seen mono-tri-triplets where it's 3 babies sharing 1 placenta. He's like, I really don't think that's the case. He's like, but obviously we're gonna do an ultrasound and we will check. And then he goes, and second, like, have the risks been explained to you about your pregnancy? And we were like, yep. And he goes, then we don't need to talk anymore about the risks. He's like, what we're gonna do is we're just gonna focus on what is happening here and now. We are not gonna harp on what could go wrong. And like, as a terrified first-time mom that is trying to absorb all of this really scary information, really scary statistics, which the initial specialist had given us around, like, you know, cognitive delays, physical delays, like just very, very preterm labor and delivery. Just trying to absorb all that information, hearing from the guy who is now going to be my doctor for the remainder of my pregnancy say, you know, we're not going to think about the scary stuff. We're just going to focus on what's happening right now, was what I needed to hear. Like, I needed that kind of doctor. Like, a quick caveat, that doctor that delivered my boys, that saw me throughout the entirety of my pregnancy, he actually came to my kid's first birthday party, and it like healed such a piece of my heart to like see this man that cared so much about me and my health and my safety and my children and like come celebrate the first year of their life. It was like a really cool full circle moment. But anyways, he gets in there, he starts doing the ultrasound, and he again kind of gets quiet, and he's like, yeah, he's like, you know, Dr. So-and-so was right. He's like, yeah, you are having mono-tri-triplets. Your babies are all sharing 1 placenta. He's like, I can see the membranes. So that would be like, the membranes means what is separating, or the amniotic sacs that are separating, you know, each of the 3 babies. And he's like, yeah, I can see the membranes. So they're not sharing, which is great news, but like they all are sharing 1 placenta, which, you know, makes you really high risk. And he basically laid out for us what the rest of my pregnancy would look like. And what that was bi-weekly appointments. So I was going in every other week for ultrasounds where they were checking all the babies for growth. They were looking at cord flow to make sure that the blood was, you know, flowing appropriately to and from the placenta to the babies, as well as they were sharing it equally. They were also looking in and measuring the amount of fluid in their amniotic sacs, because that is also a concern when you're sharing a placenta. One baby could have too much, which is an issue. One baby could have not enough, which is also an issue. So they were consistently measuring those things. So every other week I was having to take time off of work. My husband was taking time off of work. And we had to go in for these appointments that would last, you know, sometimes we were lucky and we got out of there in an hour, sometimes we were there for 2 hours, it really depended. And then on top of all of those appointments, I also had to be seen, like, for myself, like, you know, the doctor had to check my blood pressure, like urine, blood work, all of that stuff. And so we spent a lot of time at Weill Cornell Hospital in New York City. And then in May of that year, when I delivered, we transitioned to Columbia Hospital, which is where I ultimately ended up having my babies, because my doctor got a new job there, and he said, you can either come with me, I will gladly take you, or I'll pass you up to a colleague here. And I'm so grateful that we went with him, because he saved my life. I had a very difficult birth, and he saved my life, and the NICU over at Columbia saved my children's life. One of our boys had a pretty scary incident, and I just am forever grateful to them. But that's the story of how we found out we were having triplets. There's so much more to the story. There is so much more that happened in the 7 months that I was pregnant and beyond. My kids are 2.5 now, but I'm at this point where I'm like finally able to really reflect on this experience, and I'm working through like my own trauma associated with a lot of these things. And so I feel like it's important to share my story, because I know that I am not the only one in this position, and I know that a lot of other women and families are receiving scary news related to pregnancies. And I think the more that we talk about it, the more that we keep an open dialogue, the less stigmatized it can be. And like, pregnancy isn't always rainbows and butterflies and happiness and, you know, 9 months of joy and a healthy baby that you come home with. Sometimes it is scary and it is stressful and it is overwhelming, and sometimes you don't come home with your baby. And so, you know, I think all stories are worth being told and worth being heard, and so ask me anything.